It doesn't matter what you look at, it's what you see. Growing up as a child, I was a quiet, dreamy boy. I still am, completely enthralled with the natural world. Really always in a constant state of wonder for all of the Earth's living things and the diverse array of landscapes that make up this planet. So I am a nature photographer, and when this photo was taken in British Columbia last June, I was standing in this freezing cold Canadian lake, peering through my viewfinder, studying my subject, observing its behaviors. And at the same time, there was this intelligence on the other end, observing me, watching my behaviors. A connection had been made. So going into photography, I was 10 years old on my first trip to Yellowstone National Park, and my dad had signed us up for a guided tour by a local wildlife photographer. Getting into the car, I see this old film camera sitting in his passenger seat. So I asked if I could borrow it, and of course he said yes. And throughout this trip, I was just absolutely fascinated by the medium of photography. Seeing the world through this 35mm rectangle, it slows you down and binds you to your senses. And also I had this means of expressing and capturing these intimate encounters that I was having throughout this entire trip. This red fox was taken on the last day of my first trip to Yellowstone. It was napping on the side of the road, and then it woke up, shot one glance in my direction. I captured one photo, and then it was gone in the woods. And I realized at that moment that I had this power to bring this experience that I had back to the ones close to me at home and share this amazing experience. So going a couple months later, I went back to Yellowstone with a new camera and a newfound passion. I was able to watch this, standing in the freezing rain and snow, watching this family of black bears climbing the trees, seeking out the pine nuts in preparation for winter. And this first year of finding photography and the 6 years leading up to this has been this progression, always seeking out new experiences, always trying to hone both my technical skill but also a better means of artistic expression. And I never necessarily saw age as a limiting factor. I never thought that being 10 years old was something that was holding me back from reaching my full potential. At the same time, I never saw photography as the end point. I never thought that I was just going out and taking pictures, but rather using photography as a means of expressing and hopefully creating these connections between humans and the natural world. Photographs have this amazing ability to transcend cross-species and cultural boundaries, immortalizing these fleeting moments in life, capturing the essence of a landscape or the raw emotion of a living thing, and then being able to bring this experience that the photographer had at that moment back to the viewer. And because of that, photography is an extremely effective means of storytelling. So thinking about this presentation, I realized I didn't want to just talk about a single topic and then back it up from there, but rather share with you all a few frames in my life that have had a very deep impact on me, and hopefully a few photographs that can bring you to that experience as well. Starting off as an experience that is much closer to home than the deserts of Saudi Arabia or the rainforests of Indonesia, but nonetheless it's had an instrumental impact on developing me as a person and a photographer. It takes place in one of the last great wild prairies in our country, Badlands National Park in South Dakota. I was 13 years old and scanning out across this prairie dog town, and something caught my eye. There was this movement, and it was kind of this gliding, effortless movement. It was definitely not a prairie dog, and it actually had this kind of feminine quality to it. So I propped my camera up, and I looked through, and the world just slowed down, and I realized that I was looking at a wild bobcat. And it was moving through this prairie dog town for just a few seconds, and then it was gone, evaporating back into the landscape. And I remember just sitting there for a few minutes, just completely exhilarated by what had just happened. Seeing a wild cat is a very humbling experience. So the next few days on this trip was spent trying to seek out more of these glimpses of this cat. And on the last day, I watched her catch a prairie dog far out in the field. And as she was approaching, I watched her cross the road, and slowly and quietly, we followed her back to these rocky outcroppings. And when she got there, the experience that entailed, I had absolutely no idea what would happen. Out came her two offspring, her two young kittens, and they reunited for a brief moment. And I realized that for whatever reason, I had this amazing opportunity to witness this intimate scene of such an elusive animal. So they reunited, the two kittens shot me a piercing glare for a few seconds, and then they were gone again, back into the Badlands. So fast forward a few years, last January, I was on my way back to the Badlands, and we're driving on this rural country road, and I see this kind of organic shape sitting in the ditch. So I asked my dad to slow down. I get out, and I see that it's a bird. It's actually a large bird. It's an owl, just sitting in a ditch. It didn't look hurt, didn't look scared, and it's just the most curious thing. So I get out, slowly get into the ditch, and I'm crawling down on my stomach towards this bird, and I get within a few inches, and you can't get a sense for how massive these birds are until you're within just a very small space. And it opened its massive, luminous yellow eyes and just looked at me. And again, there was that connection, that moment of reciprocity, of understanding. And at this distance, I could clearly see that it was hurt. It must have been hit by a car or a truck. So I slowly backed back to the car, and about a dozen phone calls later, there was a fish and wildlife guy coming out to bring us to a local veterinarian. The entire encounter lasted about 45 minutes. And the next day, I called and checked in on this owl. And as it turns out, it had a compound fracture. It was never going to fly again. And so it had to be put down. So photography, particularly nature photography, requires a lot of patience. And more than patience, it's knowing when an opportunity has the potential to evolve into something incredible if you just wait for it to happen. So after this owl experience, the following day, I was out in the Badlands long before sunrise. A cool kind of glow about the Badlands before dawn. And pretty right up, soon off the bat, I came across this female bobcat that I've come to know so well over the past few years, the same mother from the first encounter. And she was just sitting in the field, listening and waiting. So I hunkered down, and I watched and I waited. About an hour had passed of just this, her listening and waiting for her breakfast, and me watching and waiting for her to catch her breakfast. And at this time, the sun was just poking its head above the horizon, just licking the tops of the Badlands. And a few minutes later, as the sun grew in intensity, I realized that this is the most intense and vivid sunrise I'd ever really experienced in the Badlands. And right as the light reached its peak, she began to stir, moving one limb at a time, very intentional, controlled movements. And I knew what was happening, so I adjusted my settings, composed the photo, and a moment later, she pounced. And she had her prey, and she was there all but a few seconds again, and then she went back into the Badlands. So the past few years, I've also had incredible opportunities to travel abroad. I wish I could stay here and talk to you all about these experiences for hours, but throughout all these travels, I've still been looking for trying to make these connections with images, whether it's in such a distant culture as Saudi Arabia, trying to create an image that instills the emotion of a young boy, something that can be experienced no matter what society you grow up in. Or walking on a trail in the rainforest of Indonesia, coming across a group of orangutans playing by the river, having it meet my eyes, and again, having that moment of a connection, a reciprocity, and then trying to bring that back and share it with you all. Or it's in Tanzania, just trying to capture just the sheer power of an animal. Or it's back where it all began, in Yellowstone National Park. Last Memorial Weekend, waking up in late May to this freak blizzard. It's amazing how snow can breathe new life into a landscape, completely change it. And going out into this new winter wonderland in late spring, early summer, coming across a massive bull elk with its iconic velvet antlers, picking its head up from grazing and meeting my eyes again for that one moment, and then back down to grazing. And then, so I truly believe in the power of the image. A single photo or a series of photos that can tell a story, that can bring the experience that the photographer had back to its viewers. And right now, more than ever, the natural world is facing imminent destruction in innumerable ways. Nature needs a voice now more than ever. And it's not just photography. Any talent or passion that one has can easily be put towards bettering the world, following a certain issue that you are passionate about. getting your peers and your family and the general public to stop looking at the world and start seeing it. Thank you.